Right, next is Zhenjujia, Yu Jing, the first volume of a monograph on true correction. This doesn't really need additional explanation. It aligns perfectly with your area of expertise. When studying Zhenjiu, focus on our modern textbooks. Modern textbooks are easy to understand and well organized. However, more profound concepts are still found in classical texts like Zhenjujia Yu Jing, Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, Ling Shu section, Search for Content Within. Such books are not typically used as textbooks. You will use them for self-study once you become a doctor. During the Sui dynasty, Cao Wanyang wrote Zhu Bing, Yuan Ho Lun, the first book on gynecological diseases, pathogenesis. What is pathogenesis? Traditional Chinese medicine pathogenesis resembles modern pathology, more or less the same. What is pathogenesis? We'll discuss pathogenesis in later chapters. But now, fewer people read Zhu Bing Yuan Ho Lun. Why? Most of its content is now in textbooks. Some of its pathogenesis may not be in current textbooks. After centuries of testing, some content may no longer be suitable, so it's not included in today's textbooks. The next dynamic period was the Jinyuan era, specifically the epoch of scholarly breakthrough by monks. In this period, you'll notice the transition from the Southern Song to the Yuan. The Southern Song, in particular, was quite weak. By the Yuan dynasty, it was ruled by foreign rulers. However, an unexpected phenomenon occurred here. Foreign rule suppressed the Han military and political systems. Yet, cultural suppression wasn't so obvious. There was considerable admiration for Han Chinese culture. It seems they were conquered by military force. But it seems that our culture has conquered them. So who actually conquered whom? So you see, it appears that foreign cultures entering China were always assimilated by Han culture. Since we were not assimilated, a debate about inscriptions emerged in academia. As medical knowledge advanced, knowledge grew more extensive, leading to this phase. Then, Song Dynasty scholar Chen Wuj wrote a book that's not very readable, a collection of trilateral, analyze and discuss, combined evidence, and flipped arguments. It proposes a theory of triliteration, essentially, a system for classifying sounds. How you classify these sounds. This theory still influences us today, though we no longer classify using regional accents. But that method was quite hasty. We'll explore this further in our discussion of phonetic theory. Next, we turn to the renowned scholars of the Jinjuan school. In every era, many distinguished figures emerged. However, when discussing medical history, when it comes to Chinese development, we focus on the most prominent figures. Key figures like Liu Yuan of the Jinyuan school are generally referred to as the cold cooling school. What was the cold cooling school? Like people in Guangdong, they often grab a drink, aren't you always, saying you're heated up. In fact, Liu Yuansu's theory revolves around heat. He thinks most illnesses stem from heat, even if you haven't studied medicine. You'd look for cooling remedies. Followingly, it becomes an earthy state. This involves the 5 elements theory. We won't go into detail. In Zhongyi, earth corresponds to the spleen and stomach. It closely resembles the digestive system in modern medicine. So why does earth represent the digestive system? Take a look. They're quite alike. Earth accepts and transforms everything. The digestive system takes in and processes food, transforming it into nutrients. Their functions are quite similar, so it's placed in the Earth system. Something like this. We'll dive deeper into the five elements theory. Next, Zheng Changjing talked about the Neo-Confucian school of Chinese medicine discussing evil. It mostly refers to disease causes, particularly external ones. Sometimes it also refers to internal factors. What concept do you think this is similar to? I find it quite similar to certain views in modern medicine. Bacteria and antibiotics, viruses and antivirals. It uses external factors to combat and eliminate the disease. This concept resembles that of the Neo-Confucian school. I believe the Shiafa technique he proposed actually was already present in ancient times. However, he emphasized it more, and it might work even better. I wouldn't call him a Western doctor, but you could say his ideas align well with Western medicine. Now comes Zhu Dangxi from the Yin Nourishing school, which delves into deeper aspects of yin-yang theory. We'll skip that for now. What is yin nourishment? People in Guangdong are likely more familiar with heat-related illnesses. For instance, if someone says they're on fire, folks with some knowledge may distinguish between real and false heat. The cold cooling school primarily addressed real conditions, and the yin nourishing school focused on false heat. How does yin compare to what we call false heat? How does this connect with yin-yang theory? Let's put it in terms of herbal tea. For instance, Huang Lao style, which is cold and soothing. Note that Huang Lao seems to have more than one kind of bitter, cooling formula. It's hard to define these sweet drinks, even though it's cooling, but it differs from traditional coolness. And King Buliang uses ingredients like sha shen, yu zhu, mai dong, bai he, and goji berries to nourish yin. These are common ingredients in Guangdong soups. There's also the famous six-flavor imperial pill, known for its yin tonifying properties. Regarding the six-flavor imperial pill, many people misunderstand this. Why do they think it tonifies the kidneys? While the six-flavor imperial pill does tonify the kidneys, traditional Chinese medicine is more complex. One type of kidney deficiency does not fit all cases. In traditional Chinese medicine, it's important to distinguish clearly. Are you dealing with kidney yin or yang deficiency, or QI and essence deficiency? You can't use the six-flavor imperial pill as a notification. It's best suited for kidney yin deficiency. If you diagnose it just as kidney deficiency, but it's actually kidney yang deficiency, taking the six-flavor imperial pill would be wrong. Better not to use it, which makes things worse. Traditional Chinese medicine is not a one-size-fits-all. Very detailed. Are they just looking at surface symptoms? No. You can only say they are skilled in one area. He presents a view on a specific aspect. Doesn't he still diagnose based on what's needed? For instance, if you Dr. Liu Aisu encounters a patient with a cold nature ailment, he should still use warming herbs. You might say he specializes in using cooling herbs. So, let me remind you all, I feel that the Chinese medical community sometimes has an unhealthy trend. Focus on clicks. If you say you belong to a particular school, that's understandable. For instance, if you were trained by a mentor, or if I have an interest in a particular approach, or if I lost family members to warm diseases like Schengen, that doesn't matter. But thinking your approach is the only one is a problem. I've noticed that many people, for instance, if I lean towards She Njai Hn, while praising Shtavano Hin, they don't really care. They may inadvertently belittle other schools. Or if I focus on WB Ings, when emphasizing the importance of the WNB Ning, they may also criticize the Hu A Shine school. Each school and method actually has its own use cases. So, I believe a casual practitioner should. You can favor one, but it's best to know them all. Inclusion brings many benefits. And start by declaring your allegiance to any one school. I'm more of a niche specialist. Traditional Chinese medicine is inherently a vast field. We often say experts in TCM start broadly before specializing. It installs directly as it becomes more specialized, like with otolaryngology. I focus on ears in otolaryngology. Specializing in the outer ear, I don't address the inner ear. Regardless of how external and internal connections work, the principles largely follow the main formulas used. You simply see more internal medicine patients. He focuses more on pediatrics, but an internist can definitely treat pediatric patients. Pediatricians can also handle internal medicine conditions, so they are interconnected. So this point is important. During the Ming and Qing periods, a time of comprehensive integration and biochemistry. Here's an issue. Traditional Chinese medicine. Do you think the peak lies? I'm not sure how to define that. Because now everyone is really into two books. The Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon and the Three Kingdoms Military Treatise. I think they qualify as classics. A classic surpasses its contemporaries. Rather than being perpetually at the top, I feel that it might have been in the Qing era, but many say that TCM declined during the Qing. At best, you might call them highly influential. It didn't reach Zhang Zhongjing's level. But I think there were several good schools. Because everyone excels, it's difficult for you to shine with only a few standout examples. Why am I making this assessment? Let's start with something simple. Medicine has constantly evolved, up through the Qing dynasty, and right into the Republican era. Information was relatively abundant back then. I could get any book I wanted. But it's all remakes and imperial sagas. No matter how smart you are, you had limited resources. But why not discuss the modern era? Modern people, indeed, have access to more advanced information. Getting information is incredibly convenient, and most of it can be found with a web search. While not always precise, it's usually reliable. However, there's an issue. As I mentioned, modern people's knowledge base struggles with understanding ancient concepts, especially the language of that time, and things nowadays are quite hard to understand. It became superficial knowledge. It lacks depth, whereas doctors during the Qing dynasty were far more knowledgeable than those of the Republic of China. From a surface view, it might not match today's standards, but overall, it may have been better in that era. However, I don't rule out exceptional individuals in our generation. It's even better than that era. Why not? For example, in the Qing dynasty, there were not many traditional Chinese doctors who knew much about Western medicine. In contrast, modern traditional Chinese doctors often understand Western medicine. At best, you can comment on his mindset. At least, you have Western medicine as a reference. Your approach in practice might have both pros and cons. You might get some insights from the Western medical approach, guided by Western medical diagnoses and treatments. You may inadvertently focus solely on Western medicine. Using Western medicine as a guideline, guiding Chinese medicine this way could be wrong. Why? We'll give examples later. This has pros and cons. Consider how to address this. During the Ming and Qing, many large encyclopedias were written. Examples include the Yizhong, Jingjian, and Jingu Shuji. What are the benefits of such works? They are actually summarizing and categorizing, organizing many ancient medical texts by category, such as the medical department. For example, it has sections like heart palpitations. For example, chapters on cough and heartbeat issues. What is the chapter on heart palpitations? For example, when a patient feels their heart racing, you'll find it in the textbook. Because textbooks only cover standardized content, can't include everything from ancient texts. If you're struggling with the textbook, you might want to look into these books. What does it contain? Lists major causes of illness identified by ancient doctors, along with their medical treatises. List of treatises on pathogenesis by various medical practitioners. List the diagnoses and treatments. So these books are really for reference. Most general medical libraries usually have these. Do you think it's worth buying? There's no need, as a DVD would suffice. DVDs are always available and much easier to use. Sure, if your home is fairly spacious, and you're not struggling financially. Recording and buying these books, really, placing them on your shelf would look impressive. It's often packed with many hardcovers. Just place them in the bookcase. These days, some people redecorate by putting a bookcase in the living room to showcase their knowledge. Isn't that even more knowledgeable? Next, let's look at the creation of the Wending theory. What diseases do epidemics affect? Exogenously contracted epidemics are similar to the infectious diseases we see today. Even diseases like falciparum malaria fall into this category. So at least you can tell there were infectious diseases in the Ming and Qing dynasties, and they were quite common because of the development of these theories, which matched the medical practices of that time. Here are a few examples. Wu Yuk, Ye Tianzi, Wu Jutong, and Si Shengbai were prominent figures in the Wending school. You'll study this more later. For now, just remember, Ye Tianzi developed stomach, koi, and blood differentiation. Wu Jutong developed triple Bernard differentiation. What exactly is stomach and blood differentiation? What is triple Bernard differentiation? I touched on differential diagnosis and treatment earlier. Diagnosis is essentially identifying various patterns based on a disease's context. There are many methods for categorizing these patterns. You will learn about 8 principles diagnosis later. Zhangfu diagnosis, stomach Q and blood consumption diagnosis, mountain pepper diagnosis. These 2 diagnoses are among many diagnostic approaches, each with its specific application. For external pathogen-induced warm heat disorders, they are more commonly used, especially stomach QI and blood consumption. Understanding this content is particularly important. Actually, there aren't high expectations. You are generally expected to remember the names and understand their meaning. Next, from the Qing dynasty, Huang Qingren's Yi Ling Gai Ko. What medical advancements did Yi Ling Gai Ko bring? Anatomy played a part. The Huandi Neijing touches on anatomy, but it didn't expand much. It took its own course of development. However, Western medicine arrived in China at the end of the Ming dynasty, possibly via missionary hospitals. By the Qing dynasty, Western medicine had a significant impact. Huang Qingren, likely exposed to Western medicine, his work was influenced by Western medicine's focus on morphology. He likely tried to use anatomy to see how it could advance traditional Chinese medicine. I won't comment on its overall development. However, it excels in medical theory, which dates back to ancient times. That said, it was during Huang Qingren's time. He focused on medicine's structural aspects through methods like dissection. He easily identified these morphological changes. He emphasized it and developed some well-known blood activating formulas. I believe his contribution here was significant. Why? The blood activating and stasis resolving method is now used in TCM. I find it a very effective method. It has many applications. Can I give an example? Both chronic diseases often involve stagnation of blood, and so do geriatric diseases. Hard-to-diagnose conditions frequently involve stagnation of blood. No need to mention tumors. Stagnation of blood is common in many conditions, such as we age, health maintenance, and disease prevention. Can also include blood activating and stasis resolving practices. He has indeed improved aspects of this medical field. Moving on to modern and recent times. Words fail me here. Let me touch on it briefly. You have a history of Chinese medicine. Notably, Chinese and Western medicine were integrated. In modern times, what stands out is the combination of Chinese and Western medicine. Then, traditional Chinese medicine would evaluate the full integration. Try it. People often think of it as attempted but incomplete. In other words, there have been such attempts. Then, the blending of Chinese and Western medicine. What do you think about the blending of Chinese and Western medicine? What makes it hard to evaluate? Is there no clear definition? What does blending Chinese and Western medicine mean? You haven't clearly defined it. How should I evaluate that? If you say, combining traditional and Western medicine, it means clinically treating patients using Chinese medicine if it works, using Western medicine, if appropriate, in complex cases, using both together. Then, I think it's basically a success, because that's generally how it's done in clinical practice now. And patients choose the same, seeing a Western doctor when they're ill. If that doesn't help, they turn to Chinese medicine, or taking a combination of both medications. Patients in Guangdong especially favor this approach. You have to find a way to combine them. The effectiveness should be explained this way. TCM's strengths may lie in areas where Western medicine is less effective. Western medicine's strengths may align with areas where TCM is less effective. The two complement each other perfectly. People tend to focus on different aspects. I think this can be considered a success, but defining it as a combination of traditional Chinese and Western medicine theories, creating a new medical field, is very challenging. It's far from simple. I prefer not to be too pessimistic. Let Westerners speak, not Chinese people. We won't comment on combining traditional Chinese and Western medicine. Using Western terms. What is incommensurability? He believes that Westerners generally view disciplines as incommensurable. What's that? For example, physics and chemistry are both natural sciences. But if it's clearly from physics, but if you force a chemical translation, there's no point in explaining. The key points are lost in translation. Accuracy isn't there. If the translation were accurate, why do I still need physics? I could just use chemistry to solve it. What do you mean by incommensurable? You obviously know about commensurability. Let me explain more simply. To be incommensurable means having no common ground. That might be a bit offensive to say. I'd say it's only partially commensurable. You say it's fully commensurable. It's actually quite difficult. You're studying foreign languages. Could you translate a Tang poem into English? You can probably manage one poem. But does it still capture that feeling? Actually, it's the simplest. With two strangers who know both languages, the first person translates the Tang poem to English. The second person doesn't know the original. Then translate it back to Chinese. Compare them to see the difference. This isn't about the sciences. Translating many definitions is actually quite straightforward. Never mind Tang poetry. I came across that article online. What was the Western critic's take? He discussed Jin Yong's novels, one by one. Anyway, you got through it. You thought he was introducing a specific book, but he didn't focus on the key points. He missed the crucial parts, focusing only on the less important bits. His viewpoint was completely different. Am I mistaken? You're right as well. Next up is the modernization of traditional Chinese medicine. I think modernizing TCM isn't much different from integrating it with Western medicine, as neither has a clear definition. If you were to take all the traditional elements of TCM and completely standardize them like Western medicine, then such modernization might face compatibility issues. However, if we view it as TCM continually progressing and adapting, where has the modern disease profile progressed? TCM can keep pace. I can also treat these conditions. It doesn't seem that difficult then. So the key lies in how you define the issue. So you are debating traditional Chinese and Western practices about whether their modernization has a future. Actually, there's one key point. First, you need to define clearly. Let's leave it at that for our introduction.